Alrighty, welcome everyone. Glad you could join us today for our 1-hour webinar, Best Practices to Protect Your Inbox from Fraud. I am Sarah Sturgill, part of the marketing team here at MHC, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Our speaker is Debra Richardson, who I will introduce shortly. First, I'd like to go over several housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded and attendees will receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording on our website. All participants are muted to prevent background noise, so please type in any questions you may have into the Q&A section. And there will be a post-webinar survey that will appear when the webinar ends. Please use the survey to let us know how we're doing and to request any additional information. We really appreciate your feedback. Right, and Debra, next slide, please.
All right.
Just one more item before I hand off the presentation to our speaker today. For those of you who are not familiar with MHC, we help organizations tackle digital transformation with speed and confidence using our solutions to automate the capture, transformation, and communication of paper and digital documents across core business processes. Our flexible end-to-end automation platform helps users eliminate tedious procure-to-pay and order-to-cash tasks, increase efficiency, achieve operational excellence goals, and strengthen relationships with customers and vendors. Next slide, please. Our incredible speaker for today is Debra Richardson. And just a little bit of background on Debra. She is an accounts payable speaker, consultant, and trainer with over 20 years across AP, AR, general ledger, and financial reporting for Fortune 500 companies. And for 10 years, Debra has focused on global vendor setup and maintenance. As an AP senior manager, she led a team that processed over 2,000 vendor add and change requests per month and was responsible for over 140,000 active global vendors across 7 ERPs. Now in her consultancy, she provides accounts payable teams consulting services and training to add authentication techniques, internal controls, and best practices to prevent fraud. She has a YouTube channel where she posts vendor master file tips every Tuesday and hosts a weekly podcast, putting the AP in happy. Now let's hear from Debra.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let me tell you what happens when you are responsible for global vendor setup and maintenance, and you have those 2,000 vendor requests coming in per month via regular email for the, to maintain 140,000 active vendors. So what happens is eventually you do get a fraud. And then what follows that is that you or me, right, are voluntold that you have to put processes in place, authentication techniques, internal controls, best practices in place so that it does not happen again. And so I did that, and turns out really loved it. And so that is what I am doing today, working with teams like yours. And so today we are going to talk about your inbox and how to avoid that fraud. And I will tell you, this is a great time for it too, because we are right before, the holiday seasons. As a matter of fact, today, as of the public recording of this webinar, we have Black Friday coming up, right? We've got Cyber Monday coming right after that. And then we have Giving Tuesday, which is always the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, where it's a big day of giving to charities and nonprofits. You've got employers that will sometimes match, their employees' donations. And so that is a huge day. And so the fraudsters last weekend, they probably didn't get any sleep because they were trying to figure out how to get those scams into your email inbox. So let's take a look at the agenda today. So first, we're going to talk about IT and your inbox, and then we'll talk about tricks that fraudsters use to get into your inbox. And then I'll have some processes and tips and tools that you can use to combat those fraudsters. And then finally, if a fraudulent email does get through, I'll have a 5, maybe 6-step process for you to avoid that fraudulent payment. And so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so IT and your inbox. So first of all, can you ever really trust the email? And so I always kind of knew that was a no, but this was posted by HelpNet Security. And they said, right, scammers have made it nearly impossible to take any message at face value. All communications, whether seemingly from a friend, and I put in their vendor, right, because we know that's an issue for us, from a friend, vendor, boss, or household brand, have the potential to be fraudulent. And so let's talk about what types of emails are getting through. And I am probably preaching to the choir with this one, but there is some new twists in it. So the first one is phishing emails, and we've all heard of those. And so they're really basically 3, although you may hear other phishing types. But the first one is really that beginner's level, right? It's just a mass email. The fraudsters are sending out millions of emails just to see who's going to click. And then you get to spear phishing, where they're really targeting a specific person or group. So they're watching you on social media. They're checking you out on Facebook to see who your connections are, what you're liking, what content you're responding to. They're taking that and combining it with your connections on LinkedIn. So they're stalking that too, so that when they send an email to your inbox, it seems more legitimate because they're using content and words from what they already saw you were connecting with on social media. And then the last one is whaling, and that's where they're really targeting the inboxes of your senior executives, so your C-suite, right? Because if you get an email from the C-suite, just because of human right behavior, the first thought process is to make sure you hurry up and do what the boss says. And so these are really the 3 broad levels of phishing. And what we have seen in the past, right, is they may or may not have grammatical errors. And nowadays, especially with AI and ChatGPT and other types of similar tools, it may or may not have those grammatical errors, right? And this was even before we really got into AI, or the fraudsters got access to AI, because I had a new scam alert maybe a couple years back, where there was a job posting out on the deep web for a native English speaker. And they were doing that so that they could eliminate not just the grammatical errors, but those contextual errors as well. So it's been long since, or long before AI, but with AI, it's making it more or just easier for them to produce emails that don't have those errors. And nowadays, if you do get an email and it has obvious grammatical errors, they wanted you to find that. It was intentional, because they want to weed out those folks that are not going to fall for that next level email that's coming after that original one with the grammatical errors. Also, they always have that sense of urgency, right? That in itself should be a red flag, but we know the point of that is to get us to act quickly before we can think about it. And then also they will include those emotional cues in there to, again, capitalize on that human behavior. Now, there are some different phishing types. You may have heard of it. So phishing is where the fraudsters are, right, sending emails trying to get you to reveal sensitive information or click on spoofing sites and then take your sensitive information. But there's also phishing where they're doing the same thing just by phone or by voicemail. And then you've probably also heard of SMS texting, so smishing, where they're doing the same thing, just sending you a text message, and hopefully you're going to click on that link and give your sensitive information to them. But one you might not have heard of, this one is fairly new, and it is quishing, right? And this one is even more attractive to the fraudsters, because you can't really see anything in that QR code. You can if you hover over it, right? Put your phone camera to it, and you'll see what link it's going to. But just at the outset, can't really tell anything. So that one's new, that one's up and coming. And so let's now talk about, again, something I know you already know about, right? It's business email compromise. Those emails are getting into your inbox as well. And the purpose of those is for the vendor maintenance teams, right, that get those emails, that have the ability to add banking, to change banking, or remittance details on the vendor master file, right? You're being targeted so that you can either change that information to divert vendors' payments for legitimate invoices, or to divulge sensitive information so that the fraudsters can then create their own fictitious invoices and see if they can get those through. But the twist now, which some of you may have already seen, is that it's not just for banking information, right? They don't just want you to change banking. That's still out there, but now they're also including the change of remittance address for those vendors that have check payments. And that's because check fraud is exploding. They are getting those checks, they're whitewashing them, and they are very successful at getting those checks cashed. So business email compromise, not just for banking, but it is for check payments as well. All right, so now we come to our first poll. Okay. And this poll is, how many fraudulent emails have you received this month? And so we are at almost the end of November. So go ahead and throw in there how many fraudulent emails that you have identified that have come to your inbox. Is it less than 10? Is it 10 to 20? Is it 20 to 50, or is it 50 plus? I'm not going to answer that because I probably would need some more check boxes there. Hopefully your email is not as unsecure as what mine is with just Outlook, and I'll talk about that too. So, all right, so if we can get the results for that. All right, so 75% said less than 10. That is really good. And then 25% was between 10 to 20. Okay, so that's good. So no one with 20 to 50 and no one with 50 plus. So that's even better. So on that, then let's talk about what IT, their technology, right, is. And so I talked a little bit about, the emails are getting through Outlook, but I will tell you that on average, the number of emails that actually get, or fraudulent emails that actually get through to your inbox, is about 15% of the fraudulent emails that try to get to your inbox, right? So IT is stopping about 85% of it with their solutions. And that's really great. But the problem is that you still have to deal with those 15%. And if you're using Outlook, Microsoft Defender has already identified that that percentage of fraudulent emails that are getting to your inbox is 18.2%. And so if you're dealing with Outlook, you're getting even more of the fraudulent emails that try to make it into your inbox. Now, I'm not going to go over, I've got a link here for 6 reasons why your anti-phishing strategy isn't working, and you can feel free to click on that if you're interested in reading that article. But one thing I do want to point out, many of you may have the simulated phishing test, but the issue that they find with that is that if you fail, right, what is the consequence? Also, it can also make employees complacent, right, in clicking those links. But go ahead and click to go through to that article if you want to read more on, right, 6 reasons why the anti-phishing strategy isn't working. Now, something else I would like to point out. So if you get those, if you get emails and you get an email that says, are you at your desk? Can I send you something, right? And it's an email that's coming through. That's all it's saying. It's just asking if they can send you something or if you're at your desk so they can send you something. Well, that's something that the fraudsters use because IT's method or strategy is that they don't want to get in between you and what could be a payment that needs to be made. So they're going to err on the side of getting those emails through. And so they won't interrupt the flow. And so if you do get an email that says, hey, are you at your desk? I want to send you something. And you send that back and say, well, yes, I am at my desk. Then the fraudster is then going to send an email that has that fraudulent attachment on it, that has that fraudulent link in it. And guess what? IT is not going to stop it because they don't want to stop what could be a required transaction. And that's intentional. And what that really means is, and I did hear this on a podcast between 2 IT professionals, is they have made that conscious decision as part of their email strategy to say that they're not going to stop that flow, because if they stop it and something doesn't get paid, right, you're all sitting there working, all of a sudden the electricity goes out. But if they stop it and it doesn't get paid, right, then it's their fault. But if they let it go through and it ends up being a fraudulent email that results in a fraudulent payment, then it's your fault. So they're going to let that go through. Just some of the ways that that even the IT strategy kind of sets you up to receive those fraudulent emails. So let's talk about some tricks that the fraudsters use, right, that make that 15% or 18% of the emails that get through seem more legitimate. All right, so, and to start off with, I just have a really high level, quick, evolution of fraudulent emails. It definitely doesn't include all the iterations that we've seen, but this is a good visual indicator of what we started off seeing and what we're seeing now. And so I used Apple.com because it is one of the most frequently impersonated brands out there, because everybody knows Apple.com. And so with each of these emails, there is something wrong right with that, or something wrong with them. And so we're going to start at the top and just see if you can identify what is wrong. So that first one is real.person. They're all to real.person, but it's at apple.com, or is it, right? So when we first started, there was fraudsters were putting in that extra letter. And so you see that there. If you really looked at it, right, you could see it. But, and this is what happened with the fraud that, that happened while on my watch, right, with one of my best folks. It was, you know, a busy time, and we're all getting into year end, right? So it's a busy time. And so just didn't look at that good enough to see that it was that extra letter in there. But they do, fraudsters, right, rely on us being too busy. We all have a lot of emails, and so that can be overlooked. Now, the second one is real.person@apple.co, and let's find out what's wrong with that. So for Apple, there is no apple.co, it's apple.com. But how do you know what your vendor's extension is, domain extension is? Is it .com? Is it .co? Is it .net? Is it .biz? Is it .io? Is it .me? Is it ... Lots of extensions out there, right? And so the fraudsters know, especially for those of you that do not have the relationships with your vendors, right? Maybe it's your procurement team or your internal team members that's purchasing the product, that's purchasing the services. They have the relationship. We don't necessarily know. And so this is another trick that the fraudsters use. Now, the next one is real.person@apple.com. And so there's no .co, there's no extra letter. So think about what that could be in this next evolution of fraudulent emails. All right, so this one uses, instead of a lowercase l, it's using an uppercase I. And fraudsters are doing this. This one is not obvious at all. You can't see that with the naked eye, but there are other ones that you might be able to tell, right? So they're using two V's for a W. They're using an R and an N, right, for the lowercase, for an M, or they're just using other languages, right, or other types of letters that look like they are spelling what we expect to see, but really are not. All right, so this last one looks just like the one before, real.person@apple.com. So what's wrong with this one? Well, in this latest evolution of fraudulent emails, I got to tell you, it's a trick question, because absolutely nothing is wrong with this one. And that is because the fraudsters have been so successful with their phishing emails, partially because of, you know, what had happened for the past 3 years. So partially because of that, right, people were distracted. And so the phishing emails were very successful. And as a result of that, they already have your vendors and maybe even your internal team members and maybe even your, right, login credentials. And lots of folks reuse their login credentials. And so they are able now to take those login credentials that they got from another site or spoofed site, right, and then apply that or get into your vendors, your internal team members, and maybe even your email, and send the change my banking or change my remittance address email to you or the vendor team. And to make that look more legitimate, they're even taking an old, going into, right, that email box and looking at an old historical email, and then sending that request to change remittance from that email string, making it appear even more legitimate. All right, so now we're up to poll question number 2. And that question is, are incoming external emails flagged with an external email indicator? And I ask this question because, especially this year, lots of in-person conferences have been going on this year. And so I always, talk to, accounts payable teams, vendor teams, procurement teams, and I still run into at least one and maybe more that don't have that external email indicator, right, on their emails. And so go ahead and respond to that. And then let's see how many of you do have that external email indicator. All right, so we've got 83% is yes, and 17% is no. I told you there's always at least a few, right, that do not have that external email indicator. So with that, go ahead and close this out. Let's now look at, so I put a picture here of what that external email indicator could look like. I've seen, I'm sure you have too, all types of variations of that. But I will tell you, it's kind of another trick question, because I had a scam alert, and this was back from, I think, May of 2021. Could have been earlier than that, but it was identified that the scammers or the fraudsters know how to remove that external email indicator, right? So there's all level of fraudsters, but there are fraudsters that have figured out with that with CSS code how to remove that external email indicator. And so that is some of the tools that they use to get into your email box and make that message seem, right, legitimate, that it's coming from your actual internal team member. So if an internal team member, right, fell for a phishing scam and, they use the same login credentials, and a fraudster is in their email box, that's not going to have an external email indicator. But even if they didn't, and the fraudster spoofs the email address and sends that email to you again from that internal team member, you're still not going to know that it's an external email because they have used CSS code to remove it. So that's one way. And then I talked before about the emails and the fraudsters having tools to eliminate those grammatical errors. And so I don't know if you've tried on ChatGPT, for example, to ask for things that are not really ethical, and then you get that response back from ChatGPT saying they're not going to, in so many words that there's going to be no response to that, or they're not going to provide a solution to that or response to it. But the fraudsters, right, they're not ethical, right? They don't abide by ethics. And so they have their own versions. One is Fraud GPT. Another one is Worm GPT. And they don't get any pushback, right, from those AI tools. Those tools will go ahead and do things that are not ethical, again, giving fraudsters a upper hand when it comes to creating those legitimate sounding emails. So they can tell it to create a phishing email that will, convince someone to click on this link. So they are not, again, ethical, and they've got tools that will help them in their quest to get into your email box and sound legitimate. Now, the bad thing is that social media is really not helping, and we are actually contributing to that, right? So fraudulent sites, oversharing, answering those quizzes, right, that are on, for example, Facebook. All of that is attempts to get at your contacts, but not just that. They want to, find out things about you that could be asked as a part of questions, right, for your security. So they may ask things like, what is the color of your car, or your superhero name is the color of your car and the last thing you ate, right? So blue tomatoes might be a funny superhero name, but now they have the color of your car, which for some could be an answer to security questions. And so we are not doing ourselves any good on social media. And if you plan to travel for the holiday season, right, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, other holidays in December, hopefully you are not sharing those photos, right, during your trip, but you're waiting till you get back to share those photos or putting posts out there on social media, because the fraudsters are just waiting for you to say that you're away from your office. And so this happened with the shark lady. Many of you may remember when this came out. So she lost $400,000. Luckily, she was able to recover it. Not everyone is that lucky, but she lost $400,000 because she posted that she was going, I think, to the beach or something. And but she was definitely going on vacation. And so the fraudsters took that cue, because again, they're monitoring us on Facebook, but they took that cue and immediately sent an email to her bookkeeper and was able to get a fraudulent payment to go through. And so again, luckily her bank was able to recover the funds, but that was all triggered because she posted that she was going on vacation. All right. And then another way that they get into your email box is through just relying on employee behavior, right? So they've got all types of job seeker schemes out there, but one in particular, they will advertise for a fake job. They'll even have fake interviews. Like this one scam had 3 levels of fake interviews for a job candidate. And in the last interview, they told him that, hey, we like it. We're going to give you, right, a huge raise, right? We're going to get, you're going to have that huge starting salary. And we're going to send, right, that job offer that's going to have the actual salary, right, your starting salary in that job offer. And so, of course, the job candidate is very excited, right? And they're just waiting for that email. But the key is that they're sending the email to that job candidate's current work email. And they know when that email comes through that job candidate, right, is going to immediately open that email, because they want to know, right, what that starting salary is. But of course, when they open up the email, that is going to be malware or some other type of software or trick to get into your company's system. And so you may not even do anything wrong. That employee may not even do anything wrong. They're just responding to, right, a job offer, and this is what happens. So they're taking advantage of that. And in that example that I just talked about, they actually did do video job interviews, right? It's not like they were hide behind anything. They did video job interviews. So it's getting bad out there. And again, the fraudsters are relying on employee behavior. And so this particular one is called optimism bias. And I did put a link to to the article that I got that from. And actually it has an infographic that has 9 different cognitive biases that hackers use. So make sure you click through to that and hopefully share that with your group or your team so that everybody understands what the hackers are working with or counting on. All right, and so this next one, and everybody may think that, okay, fine, we've got that confirmation call, so that should make everything better. Well, but there's a problem with the confirmation call, right? It's not being done correctly. It's not being done at all. And there's just other, right? You can't reach folks. And so the confirmation call is not what it's not that silver bullet, because if it was the silver bullet, there would be no fraud and we wouldn't even be having this webinar, but it's not. And so let's talk about why it's not. And so here's some things that are wrong with the confirmation call. So the first one, and everybody's probably experienced that, right? The vendors don't pick up. They may send us a change, could be a legitimate change, but they'll send it to us and then they'll go off and do vendor things, right? So they don't pick up the phone that first time, or maybe not even the second time. And it could be an issue with time zones. It could be, right, that the vendor, again, is busy. They're off doing vendor things, or it could just be that you don't have the right contact. And I tell you, it is getting harder to find that right contact. I was at a conference last week, and accounts payable manager said, it's getting harder to find, do that web research so you can get to the right contact, because lots of companies, because of fraud, are removing telephone numbers, and they're also removing email addresses. And so it's getting harder to reach out to those vendors. And when you do reach out to the vendors, they may not pick up. And that's also even more so true with vendors that are not in the US, that are in other countries. Now, it could also be, and I've seen this too, that the confirmation, even when you do reach a vendor, it's not really valid, because the team members are using information that came from that email, or that came on that fictitious invoice. And of course, the fraudsters are going to say, sure, I approve, or I submitted that request for a bank account change or remittance address change. And you might say, no, well, nobody's doing that. We all know that that should not be done. But let me just say that if you are not the person that is making that phone call, if you are relying on direct reports, or maybe people from other departments to make that call, if they you don't have the contact information in your accounting system or ERP, if they can't find it right online, because again, companies are removing emails and telephone numbers, right? And it's been sitting there, they got to get it done. They have quotas they have to make for their productivity. They are going to go to that email, and it has been done, right? And they are going to confirm it and still make that fraudulent payment. Also, we see that the actual confirmation is not what it needs to be, right? They're revealing banking information, and all of us still, are working, if we're not 100% in the office, we are working hybrid, we're working in remote locations. And so saying, that full bank account could be putting that sensitive data at risk. And then just really no authentication when you're contacting the person, to make sure that you are speaking to the right person and not a fraudster. And then lastly, I talked before about how with emails, the fraudsters are getting in because they are successful in phishing. And so they've got the username and password because people are reusing them. And so they go into the email, find a historical email string, send that with the request to change. And so the person that receives that request, it's coming from a historical email, it must be the right person. And so you'll find that, or I have seen with clients, and also with other articles that have been posted about fraudulent payments, that those calls at that point are just not being done. Or the calls have been made over and over again, vendors never picked up, and so it's just left kind of hanging or pending, and it's not being done. And in some cases, that change has been made and the fraudulent payment is going out before it can be confirmed. All right, so let's talk about some ways to combat those fraudsters. So now that we know what they're doing to get into your email box, we know you're getting at least 15% of those fraudulent emails. And so let's talk about some ways that you can combat the fraudsters. So the first thing is, and all of these ways, by the way, I think most of them are zero cost. So one of the best ways is to just keep up with frauds and scams. And so I put some resources here that you can click through to either sign up to get alerts, or that you can click through and just search for the latest alerts. So I have the FBI here for those of you that are doing 1099s in-house, right? You'll want to, or not even in-house, just, responsible for tax reporting, period. You'll want to sign up for the IRS, their tax scam / consumer alerts. They have a whole e-news subscription, right, where it's a ton of alerts. But if you sign up for this particular one, every time they send an email alert about scams, you'll get it. The latest one they received, or they sent out, I believe it was this week or late last week, was on gift card scams. So make sure you sign up for that. Also, Better Business Bureau has one. They're really good for like regional scams. Now, if you sign up for my new scam alerts, I do review all of the different resources, and I will post them. And unfortunately, I've been posting about 2 to 3 per week. But if you sign up for them, as soon as I post them, that very next day, you'll get a cumulative list of all the new scams that I have that I've been alerted to. All right, and then once you get those scam alerts, right, or new fraud trends, share them with your team. So if you've got a vendor team meeting, accounts payable team meeting that you have on a recurring basis, have fraud as a static agenda item and talk about the latest frauds that are out there. If you've got new tools to help avoid fraud, like the tools we're going to talk about today, share that with your team members so that they have it as well, have it as a static agenda item. And then let's say that your email, right, has been hacked and you've got a fraudster that's in there. How do you know if it's been hacked? So one way is that you can't log in because they've gone in there and changed the password, or maybe there are other devices that are accessing your account that you are not aware of what those devices are. Also, you could keep getting password reset emails. Where's that coming from? That's the indicator that the fraudster is in there trying to change passwords to other accounts. Also, there are strange emails or strange messages in your sent folder. You may even have some complaints from other people about emails that they said they received from you, but you did not send. And then there's just overall, right, suspicious activities with your accounts. And you really should check to see if your account data has been breached. Now, one of the things, so I have, and I think I showed another one when I was talking about the static item, but I have a YouTube channel where every Tuesday I post a vendor master file tip of the week. And so this particular tip came from the Secret Service, and they were explaining how these fraudsters get into email accounts and send all these emails and nobody's the wiser, right? Why wouldn't you be able to see, right, if you checked your sent folder that there's an email, right, to change banking, to change your remittance address that you did not send to your buyer. How is it that they're getting away with that? What they're doing that the Secret Service uncovered is that they're using your email rules to reroute that specific, right, string, subject line, to go to either an outside email or to just delete it, right? So they're using email rules. And I have to tell you, before I saw this alert, I would probably, create an email rule that I needed at the time, and then I wouldn't go in there again until I needed to adjust it or create another email rule. And so that easy precaution from the Secret Service is to check your email rules daily. That is a way that you can easily detect and very quickly detect if a fraudster is in your inbox, right? And if they are sending those emails out, check your email rules, because there will be some email rules in there that you did not create for the purpose of keeping those fraudulent emails out of your site. All right, and then password manager. Now, I don't have a zero cost on this one, but I thought this was a really good podcast episode that I did with a CISO, right? So he was a director of information security, and he talked about the fact that, and I don't know how many it is, I don't know how many you have, but I know I have a lot, that employees can have up to 100 passwords to remember, right? And the recommendation or best practice is you just don't reuse them, so that if a fraudster does get a hold of your password, username and password, they won't be able to get into your email account or other accounts. But that's easier said than done, because you've got so many passwords to remember. And another best practice is to make sure that they're 20 digits long, because then it takes much longer to crack the password, if it can be cracked with that length. And so Casey Allen talked about having that discussion with your IT team, right, to see if you already have a license for a password manager. When I talk to folks, some do, some don't, right, so that you could then use that password manager so you don't have to remember those long passwords. It'll generate them for you. A thing that I really like about it is that if you happen to click on the link and it is a phishing link, right, in an email, because you didn't think it looked legitimate, you didn't think it was a phishing email, and so you clicked on a link. If you are not, and you have that password manager, if that is not the legitimate site, if it is a spoof site, it will not pre-fill your username and password. So that can be a red flag for you. So check out that Putting the AP in Happy podcast, episode 151, and you can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. And then another zero cost tool that I have for you today is whois.com/whois. And don't forget to put in that extra whois, because if you just go to whois.com, they're going to want you to buy a domain, right? You don't want that. You want to put in whois.com/whois, and you're going to come to this whois domain lookup. And so if you are suspicious, right, about an email domain or an email address, and you look at that domain and it looks a little bit suspicious, you can copy it and paste it into this search. Now, don't type it in, because if you type it in, you're going to type in that lowercase L in Apple, right, instead of the uppercase I. So copy and paste it. And then when you go ahead and click search, the results that you're going to get, actually, you're going to get a lot of information. But what I look at is the date of registration. And so No, you are not going to know the dates that all of your different vendors, right, or any suspicious vendors register their domain. You're never going to know that. But what you will know is if it was a recent date. And so lots of times fraudsters will create specific spoof sites just for the campaign that they're going to be running. And so you'll see it could be a red flag if it has a date that is within weeks or months. That could be a red flag. You put that with other red flags with the email, and now, right, you may have something that you may need to send over to, right, your IT team because it is a suspected fraudulent email. So that is no cost. And by the way, for this one, apple.com, I think that one is good because the registration date is 2/19/1987, and I think they were in somebody's garage at that point. So I think this apple.com is valid. And then lastly, I do not have a zero cost on this one because this does cost, but I have to tell you, the best thing that I could say for avoiding, right, the fraudulent emails in your inbox is to just get out of risky email. Now, this number 6 doesn't mean anything. It was just the 6th step in a process for secured email, but and actually this was sent to me and I absolutely loved it. And so if those of you not familiar with secured email, this is where you as the buyer, if you want to collect, and many will use it just for sensitive information like banking or W-9s, because that could have a social security number on it, right? And so that's where you would put in the vendor's actual email address into the secured email. The vendor would then get a request to sign in, again, using that actual email address. And then they would get into that secured email. And what I really like about it is when you're exchanging that information, or the vendor's giving you that, sensitive information, instead of it being on a form, it doesn't even have to be on a form. So now you don't have to have a form that's floating all around. It can be that sensitive data, those fields to input that data can be embedded in that actual form. And that's what you're seeing on screen here. So there's no form that you have to, right, maintain, and best practice is to always update it every year, because if you get an old form, that's an indication that it could be fraud. But you don't even need any of that, right? You don't need a form for your internal team members to keep for 100 years and give it to anybody that asks. It's embedded in the email. And I know that nothing is 100%, but this at least gets your vendor sensitive information out of risky email. And so you can use your email for instructions, for other things, but when it comes time to collecting sensitive data, you can put that into secure email. All right, and now we're to poll number 3. And this is, do you have a documented procedure for handling vendor inquiries via email? And so answer yes, and it's updated, or yes, but it's not updated. How about no? Right? You don't have any documented procedures, or maybe you're unsure. The point of the documented procedures is, one, you want to make sure that you have an auditable process. In order for it to be auditable, it has to be documented. And two, you can create scripts and other instructions for your vendor team that makes it easier to identify fraudulent emails. So let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Okay. So no is 67% and unsure is 33%. So no yeses. All right. So you really need, I know we've got about 7 minutes left, but I'm going to get through this last section of what you need, what you can implement, but it does need to be documented to avoid avoid the fraudulent emails that get into your inbox, and that's authentication. And so you see here, I have some sample data in authentication reference template is what I call it. And if you think about it, this is what, right, when you contact your bank will ask you 2 to 3 identifying questions before they even, right, start talking to you about what you contacted them to talk about, just to make sure you are who you say you are. And you can do this via phone or via email. Ask them 2 to 3 identifying questions, right? Studies have shown that if you push back on fraudsters, right, they'll just hang up or abandon the email string and go on to the next potential victim that's not asking these type of things, especially if they're asking about, hey, how do I change my banking? No problem. Can you give me, right, an invoice number and the last 5 digits of your existing bank account? And if they push back on that, right, if they don't have the existing bank account, that is a huge red flag, because if they had access to get the new banking and the authority to ask you to change it, why can't they get the existing? And when you document that for your vendor team members to ask those questions, right, document it in a script. And so that way, your team members can authenticate to make sure that they're actually talking to their vendor or to their internal team member if they're inquiring or submitting documents on behalf of the vendor, and not a fraudster. That is zero cost. And then now here is a 5 or 6 step process to avoid a fraudulent payment, even if that it was a fraudulent email that got through that triggered that fraudulent payment. So let's talk about that. So the first one, and again, these are all zero costs, and we're really surrounding that confirmation call with more controls. So the first one is authenticating the requester, asking them those identifying questions. We already talked about that. Only if they answer those identifying questions correctly do you send them, right, your instructions and hopefully form or secure email to collect that information, but only after they authenticate. And on that form or fields that you're collecting, right, that new banking from, authenticate that data. So if they are asking to change banking, ask for the existing banking, and then compare it when you get that information in to make sure that it matches. And again, if you're asking for authenticating data more than what anyone else is doing, the fraudster will more than likely abandon that request and go on to the next potential victim that's not asking that information. And then the next one is, yes, let's say they submitted that, they are the right person, they submitted that information, and now you're going to do that confirmation call, right, before you make that change like normal. And then you're going to come in when it's successful and make that change. But this time, when you make the change, it's going to trigger, right, either manually or automatically, right, trigger an email to the vendor to say that their remittance information or something on their file has changed. You didn't make that change, contact us. Hulu does it, your bank does it, Amazon does it, online accounts do it when you make changes to your accounts. And so if you do it to your vendors, I know we can have questions, all types of jokes about vendors reading the email, but they may be able to contact you before you even pull that payment into the pay file to say they didn't ask you for that change. But let's say you do pull that payment into the pay file. Before that pay file goes out or before that check goes out, run a report for all payments over whatever threshold you set for all payments, or for those vendors that have had remittance changes in the last 30, 60, 90 days, and just have a second set of eyes on it before it goes out the door, right? And this is the 6th step that you might have to do if you have an unusually large payment, like in the millions. You don't typically have it, but this time you do. If you're doing an ACH, for example, it's going to take about 48 hours for that to get to your vendor's bank. But when it does, and the vendor can see it, contact them within those 48 hours and just confirm that they received the payment. Because if they didn't receive the payment, now you have time to recover it from the bank, because you're not waiting weeks, maybe months, right, for the vendors to notice it gone and then contact you. You'll find out within that 48 hours. And then lastly, make sure you document this process so that it can be audited. I know it's a lot more work, and the reality is that you're only going to get people to do it consistently when they're busy, like year end, if it's documented and auditable. All right, so we do have a fourth poll here. Do you have an active or upcoming AP initiative? So go ahead, click yes or no. And while you're doing that, when you get done, go ahead, if you have questions, put them into the question area. And we'll see if we don't have time to answer, then we can follow up, or I can follow up afterwards. All right, so the results too, do you have an active or upcoming AP initiative? All right, and it looks like 33% say yes, and 67% say no. All right, Bridget.
Thank you for an exceptional presentation, Debra. We do have one question that came in. We have a confirmation call in place. Isn't that good enough to prevent fraud?
So I would say this: if you are the only person that does the confirmation calls, that do the confirmation calls, and you know that you are not compromising, right, the banking information by repeating it, that you are asking your vendors to validate it, you're authenticating them, you're not using the information that came in the email request, right? If you're legitimately contacting the vendor until you get through to them and that confirmation is valid, then I would say you are fine. But if you're not doing that, like I wasn't, and you are relying on other people to do that, no, it is not enough. There have been numerous cases reported where the confirmation call was done and there were still fraudulent payments due to the folks that are doing those calls. They're just not handling those correctly. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. And that wraps up our webinar for today. So again, thank you, Debra, and thank you all for attending. If you're interested in learning more about what's going on at MHC, register for our monthly newsletter, and you'll receive reminders about upcoming webinars and interesting thought leadership content like our great session today. A link will be included with our follow-up email, so be sure to register, and have a great day, everyone.
Okay, thanks, everyone.